Hey Pat,
Hey, Chris. How's it going?
good, good, good. Great to see you as always.
Thank you. Same here. Same here.
Yeah, it's a cold day in the Northeast, and we're trying to stay warm.
Indeed. Indeed.
So we thought we on Holy Compost we thought we would talk about sort of take a deep dive into the psycho and spiritual roots of unworthiness and how people can sort of dig themselves out of that space, which is not very life-giving.
Yes.
So we've been talking about self-talk for one thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
For me, that's been huge.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, when I started paying attention to my self-talk, which before I paid attention to it, I really literally didn't know that I had it. I mean, I knew that I told myself, okay, don't be late for work and you better start cooking dinner. But I didn't know that I had any psychic self-talk or very much of it. Come to
Hmm.
find out
Hmm.
that um, psychologists and psychiatrists and scientists in that area say there's between 30,000 and 70,000 thoughts every day that go through our head. Um,
Mm.
and the ones that I was very concerned about were the ones that were self-analytical and maybe not so positive about being self-analytical, and the ones that were really punitive that I was telling myself. Um, and I really kind of got very concerned that I'd see it in other people. I'd see them putting themselves down. And while it's a very culturally, it's to be expected, it's kind of an attitude that's to be expected in our culture. When I realized that I had that too, I started to be very concerned about it. And I wanted to change it. I didn't want to punish myself, especially when I hadn't done anything wrong necessarily. It's probably very important to, if you've made a clear mistake, to kind of take stock and ownership and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? But just on a day-to-day basis, it's
Mm.
I've learned later on it's very, very harmful to have these judgmental self-judgment thoughts going through the head all the time. And it's kind of like you have um your own punishment built in. And it kind of runs amok.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying for sure. And I agree. I think it's epidemic that the culture has produced this. Well, we talked about it a little bit, sort of a rating system of how well you're doing. Um, and that could be all kinds of levels of so forth and so on, jobs, money, social standing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what I mentioned earlier when we were speaking is that that's a loser's game. That's a losing game. I mean, and because that means that one has accepted the dualistic mindset about those who make it are better than those who don't make it in some way. And I mentioned the fellow Panache Desi, who is saying clearly that we are perfect just as we are, without doing a thing. And of course, somebody hearing that might say, what does that mean? Well, he would explain it as we are. Well, he has a lot of different ways of explaining it, but he might use the term beams of light. We are beams of light. beaming down from the Godhead. And we are simply messing things up when we don't recognize our wonder and our beauty, and we're scrutinizing and recriminating ourselves. And so, you know, he really says, how dare we? How dare we? In some ways,
You know,
how dare we do this?
We're making sort of an extraction from the spiritual realm when we're punitive about ourselves.
Right.
Unnecessarily.
So we thought, right. Well, we thought that the culture cultivates this whipping post kind of thing, and we buy it, and we get inculcated, I think is the term, into believing that we are less than. So all of these messages we continue to deliver ourselves aren't just internal, they're external. There's comparisons being done all the time, and how do we measure up, and so on and so on and so on. That the winner is the winning is the important thing, and it's like, winning what? What are we winning?
Yeah.
So I think that's really behind this voice that is saying, you're not measuring up, you're falling short, oh, look at what you did there, and all this shame-based kind of stuff, when we are always doing what we do.
Right.
And, you know, I could have said, the other way of saying that is, we're doing the best we can. When you say that, people are like, well, then why does it turn out so the way it does? Well, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I think that most people, or if not all people, wherever they find themselves, are doing the best they can in that particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that might even include what we're talking about right this minute, which is we are scrutinizing ourselves and have this negative self-talk, this narrative that says we're not enough. We'll stop doing that when we make the when we recognize that we are spiritual beings. And how could that be bad? We're having the human experience, to use the old cliche. Spiritual beings have a human experience.
Right. And we are, as the spiritual mythology points out, we are images of God. And I think that's like huge and ginormous to me, because it means I need self-respect. It means I need to be gentle with myself. It means I need to parent myself in the best way. Not all of us were parented very well, but there are some good parents out there, and that's the kind of thing I'm referring to, is the nurturing, the encouragement, the comfort, and one of the things I've done, which has been a huge part of my spiritual journey, is to monitor my self-talk. This has been I'll go so far as to say that I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now without this exercise of monitoring my self-talk. And not that I think that anybody can get to a certain place and arrive. It's not like that. It's just having a sense of inner peace and inner lack of struggle. I still have struggle, but much less than I did before, because I'm not being punitive with myself for the most part anymore, because I monitored my self-talk and sort of restructured the punitive messages in a way that a really good parent or teacher or somebody who was in a child's life would do, who was causing them to grow and not regress.
Mhm.
So the whole idea of monitoring self-talk for me meant that I had to make a commitment to literally write down. So what I did was I set a timer for myself when I started this out. Every half hour to an hour, I would have a timer go off, and I would ask myself, what have I been thinking about for the past half hour or hour? And I would just write down, I cooking dinner, getting ready for work, critiquing something that I did at work that didn't work out well and feeling really bad about it. Having an argument with one of my kids, that I think I could have done better at. And it could be even really going back decades of patterns that I've developed, that we all do, about what kind of person I am, and maybe punishing myself a little bit for that. And then really asking myself, do I really deserve to be punished for that? I mean, what good is it going to do if I punish myself or reprimand myself for that? So I started to really rethink the whole thing. And I really don't know how long it took. It was not a short period of time. I want to say that I started to feel a little bit different after a couple of months of this kind of effort monitoring. And after a couple of years, I started feeling a noticeable difference in my peace of mind. But I'm not sure I could have done the work that I've done spiritually unless I had done that.
Yeah, I had a different experience, but with, I think, a similar outcome, and that was doing the 12 steps. And it wasn't, it was a revealing of things that were, down inside of me in a new way. First of all, there was an invitation to God, which was really new for me, to accompany me on this journey. And my sponsor would tell me again and again, did you ask God to, help you? And did you light a candle? That was an idea that kind of represented God, and so forth. But to get to the point, so after all this arduous, gut-wrenching work, what began to happen automatically without a lot of writing down anything more, certainly there was a lot of writing in the 4th step, and coming to grips with the way I moved through life, which was willfulness. Simply stated, I was willful. I wanted it to be my way, and I was uncomfortable. And I thought if I got it my way, I would be less uncomfortable. Well, that was not a truth, but that's what I believed. But the point I'm trying to make is, at some point, what happened sort of seemingly automatically was I began to notice that I was going easier on myself, that I wasn't doing that negative self-talk, and I wasn't self-recriminating myself. I just began to move into a different way of being. not because I hadn't done anything, but because I had uncovered stuff that was really rooted in my psyche. And, my sense of this is that the power of God, or the grace of God, allowed me to do that. And then the payoff was this new voice, this new narrative. Now, that said, over the years, that's, almost 30 years ago, I did that work. Because I have not maintained this searching and moral inventory that you take inventory. Step 10 is continue to take personal inventory. And when we're wrong, we promptly admit it. And that would be to ourselves too. That isn't just to our neighbor or a friend, it's to ourselves. So if one is applying that principle and working that into their life, I need to make an amend to myself for just putting myself through the meat grinder because I did thus and so. And then asking God to remove that heavy chastisement. And it works. I mean, I think it's exactly what you're talking about. It's just a different formula of doing this thing where we're saying, give yourself a break. Why don't you?
Yeah, I used to say,
and then,
I used to say, tell myself, would you say what you just said to yourself, to your best friend? That was my litmus test.
Right. So the good news is when we can give it to ourselves, we're much more likely to give it to the next person. So if we don't give it to ourselves, then we're either going to do lip service because we haven't forgiven ourselves for what we need to forgive, and we're trying to forgive everyone else. And it's really a false sense of things. So I think what we're talking about, if we summed it up here a little bit, is becoming aware of the way one considers themselves first, how they are with themselves, what they do, what they give themselves, how they love themselves or not, has everything to do with how it plays out in life. Everything. It's not just a small part. It's it. So because if we're telling God, who we are piece of, that you're unforgivable, or whatever we say. Wonder how God feels about that. Hey, God, you're unforgivable. I have a sense that God said, oh, so sad, so sad about her.
Well, it's a kind of a dramatic statement, but one that I have actually never even considered. But I think I'm going to think about that, because when we are, we are a piece of God, and our soul, we share our soul with God's soul. And there's really no separation between us
Absolutely.
and God at any time. It's only us that perceives a separation. But if we were to reprimand God, which I've been known to do because I don't like suffering, and I don't have any answers about why it happens and all that stuff, but it does cause me heartache. And I've been known to say, what did you have in mind here? But getting back to the subject, that's a kind of a startling idea to sort of, would you call it reprimanding God, or what would you call it?
Yeah. You really screwed up. And that's, I mean, I'm feeling like that's such a way to separate oneself from the goodness and love of God, because you actually think you're separate from it. You're separate from God. You're not separate from God. You're never separate from God. So, but we can believe that because, again, I think it's culturally the way we've been operating.
Well, and
I mean,
also
if your parent, yeah.
I think our anger is part of the relationship with God. I think of Job, and one of the reasons I love Job so much is that he is absolutely candid and naked with his um uh with his experience of suffering, um and also doesn't hold back when he talks to God at all. But we do, for some reason. We are culturalized to censor our language that we use with God. And I think that
Mm.
impedes the intimacy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So every time I read the book of Job, I just I have trouble with scripture, and I always have, but Job and we are, I get him, and he makes me, I always feel sort of cathartic and like I've dumped out the garbage after I read that book.
That's great.
Yeah. So a little bit off the subject there, but yeah, so how do we become aware of these messages and that we're feeding ourselves in real time, so that the setting the timer is worked very well for me and might work for other people. There might be other ways to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab something. I'm gonna grab something real quick.
Sure.
So one of the things a sponsor will tell their sponsee that they're bringing through the 12 steps as they're laid out in the first 164 pages of the big book, which is, the way that they did it back in the day. The point of doing the 12 steps is to have a spiritual awakening, because you've gone to sleep and you're acting out from that sleeping place when you drink alcoholically and you lose your morals and you go, haywire. So one of the things they say is to read page 86, excuse me, through, I think it's 88 every day at the end of the day. And this is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read a little bit of what they propose you should do. So when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, or what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So that's one paragraph. That's the, retiring at night. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Brilliant. And right on. And it goes on, and another time maybe I can read more, but I mean, it really is very specific about how we take care of this thing that you and I are talking about here, how we get on track, so to speak.
And that's from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
That's correct. Page 86. Yep. And so, they really did their homework on this 12-step thing. I mean, they saw how we can squirm out of things and not, oh, that's no big deal. I don't have to go back to my neighbor because I said thus and so to them or whatever. So clearly they knew that the fear-based ego will run the show if it's allowed to do so. It has to be, I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about your self-reflective stuff. It's checking, it's holding the ego, it's saying to the ego, wait a second, hold on there, and it can really get a life of its own. And this deep resentment begins to color everything. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, as
That is,
always, my opinion is that everything from the 12-step programs is brilliant, and
yeah,
certainly
spiritually,
certainly saved my family when my mother was drinking.
yeah. So that's step 11. That's step 11.
Step 11, yeah, sought through prayer and meditation
Yep,
to
that's what that is. What I just
improve.
read. Yeah, what
So
I just
step
read from.
11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God, praying only for his will for our lives and the power to carry that
To
out,
carry it out. Yep.
which is
So,
a beautiful mantra
so I,
for me.
so I think I'll actually all these years later, follow my sponsor's advice and read this every night. Wow. Imagine that.
Great idea. Well, sometimes our intentions fall asleep, and now you just woke up.
Well, you help wake me up. And this conversations help wake me up because I often want to go to sleep because I think fear is always sort of the underlying thing. Fear of whatever, you name it.
Right. And there's sometimes when our life goes, we find that our life is really piling on a lot of difficult circumstances. And sometimes in our life when it's that load is relatively light. So we have to respect our pylon tolerance.
Yeah, I suppose, but it's during those pylon times that we really need it more than ever. And that's, that's the work to recognize that, to see that this is really the time I need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So reframing the negative messages is such important work, or has been for me. And this is where monitoring the thoughts, first you're telling yourself to brush your teeth and get ready for work, and the next thing you're seeing something you didn't finish last night, and you're saying, oh, why couldn't you never get anything done or whatever, and you're yelling at yourself for something that doesn't need to be,
Yeah.
you don't need to respond that way.
Yeah.
So reframing those messages with self-respect and self
And
love.
love. Yeah, love.
So and then memorizing some of them so that when you're in that emotion-packed moment, highly charged moment, you can think of those good thoughts to replace them with, because what I've noticed with myself is that when I'm triggered emotionally, my brain doesn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be difficult for me to sort of construct a positive message to give myself, to replace it with the negative punitive one I just gave myself. So that's why getting sort of like a bank of positive positive replacement messages lined up, and memorizing them would be a really, really helpful thing to do. Like one
For
of
some
my,
people, that wouldn't work for everyone.
right.
But for some people who are very sort of that can do that, can hold that would be beautiful. I
Mhm.
can say that for me, it would be I do everything I could to avoid it. It's just not the way my brain works.
To avoid
Uh,
what?
to avoid doing that, to be so careful about it. I've got to sort of get the big picture
Mhm.
and have a shift. And I really, again, I believe that without the help of God, I'm lost. If this is simply an intellectual pursuit, it's not going to happen for me, because
Mhm.
I need the battery. I need the God battery to get anything accomplished. That's just me.
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't.
the replacement messages for me have been very, very helpful.
Yeah. Yep.
And also the recognition that when I'm feeling punished and um like there's a lot of failure that I've been absorbing, and when somebody important to me doesn't approve of what I've been doing or is angry, I just get I feel like I'm drowning.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm drowning, and all I want to do is like save myself from dying at that moment.
Yeah.
So the coaching that I give myself um helps me to retrieve some of my I don't know, um maybe objective, it's not really the right word, but so I can sort of stop myself from drowning. So it gets swept away very, very easily when there's, especially when somebody that I really care about is not happy with me.
Mhm.
Um so it's
And I
really
think
helpful.
that, yep, go ahead.
It's
Well, I
just
think
really,
that,
go ahead.
no, I just think that brings us back to where we began, which is when we are, when we have a full acceptance and love for ourselves, then I wouldn't, there's a term they actually use in AA, we become bulletproof.
Mm.
And so I think that when we can capture the essence of our our value, the goodness of us, then we'll be less likely to have this other thing going on. The slope wouldn't be so slippery. I mean, it
Right.
certainly would still be slippery because that's life. But I think a big piece is this. My computer's starting to heat up. Is this that we don't have something solid already going on, and I think for me that's tantamount that I need to continuously recognize the presence of God within me. And I don't know that. I think that is why people sometimes wear crucifixes.
Mm.
I think that's one of the reasons they wear them, because they touch them and they say, "Oh, right, right." Whoa, I almost forgot. Um, so um, to clean the decks and clear the decks, stuff will come back on, but to really clear the deck and recognize the essence of God within us, then I think we're going to be less likely to have that slippery slope take us down. And cultivating a presence of God within is a daily process.
Mm.
If we miss a day, then that's a whole lot to miss a day without recognizing God is within. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very complex, and I think it's complex because we live in a culture that is so externalized. It's so externalized, and we
and,
are
and
pulled by it.
and performance oriented.
Absolutely.
And you just can't make a mistake at anything.
Nope. Nope.
And if you do, there's like a million apologies. Well, like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, some kind of morning grounding in the belief that God lives within me is big. And then that nighttime thing to, review the day, that seems big too. And make a note. Oh, I've got to go tell, so and so that, I was not nice, and I want to say I'm sorry for not being nice, a nicer. Yeah.
I have
I mean, yeah.
I have a nighttime giving thanks of E. Cummings poetry. I thank you, God, for this most amazing day. And it goes
Yeah.
on, but that's what I say to myself when I'm getting my bed ready to get into.
It's
And
wonderful.
yeah, it's a celebration of the day, which if we didn't have the day, what would we have? We'd have all darkness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
to be grateful for.
Absolutely. So sounds like we have some responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think a commitment to self-gentleness and kindness,
Absolutely.
to replace the punitive messages that we find ourselves giving ourselves. And by the way, I don't know when I started doing this attention to my own thoughts. I think maybe it was maybe 20 years ago. I really am not good with time. Maybe it was less than that, because I remember my kids were like in elementary or preschool, I think, when this started, because I remember listening to a psychiatrist from what's the mental health uh place in Boston, in Belmont.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I know it. Yeah.
yes, it's a mental health hospital. Anyway, he said that yeah, he said we'll inherit our kids' self-talk, and our we inherit our parents' self-talk, sorry. And that really sobered me up quick. Oh my goodness. So I really started paying attention to it, and I
Sure.
realized I had a lot of work to do, but I did it, and it was important enough to me to keep at it.
Yeah.
And I was also really fascinated by all the stuff that I was telling myself that I wasn't
Mhm.
aware of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then figuring out, okay, what do I do with it? I know that it's there. What do I do with it? Well, I decided I needed to reframe it and replace it. And it's really given me a tremendous amount of inner peace, and just enjoyment of life, because I'm not whipping myself. I occasionally I do find myself, because we do make mistakes, and I do tell myself I shouldn't have done that. But I make amends, and figure out what I should have done, and I move on. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
been
I
a
think,
blessing.
yeah, absolutely. So I think, what do you think? Good for
And
today?
yeah, I think it's been a good holy compost.
It has been a good holy compost. We turned it over. We used our little, whatever you call them, rakes and
Pitchfork.
pitchforks. Yes.
Yeah, you got to give it a lot of air and water, the
Yes.
compost, to keep it
Yes.
going in its transformation process.
Absolutely. Well,
Okay,
good,
my
Chris.
friend. Well, I'm grateful for your friendship and for your insights, and for this wonderful conversation we have.
Absolutely. I feel the same, Chris. Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll see you at the next Holy Compost.
Will do.
Okay.